There's a word we're not supposed to say. It starts with an N. This word has a unique legacy of tragedy and pain inflicted on an entire race of people by those in power. This word trivializes the suffering of generations of people. We thought we'd put these horrors behind us, but this word opens old wounds and a doorway to more pain and violence. I've made mistakes around the use of this word in the past. None of us are perfect. And as difficult as it is, I think we need to talk about the word Nazi. Hey hooligan, welcome back. I'm Sam, and if you're new here, subscribe and hit that bell for more
Dick jokes for justice.
Starting at the top, Black Lives Matter. And people who are still saying all lives matter are racist assholes. And before you hit me with that, you can't know what's in their heart or brain or colon or whatever organ holds racism, I call bullshit. I've got 'em! Anyone who calls someone a racist is claiming to have psychic powers. But that's your play, huh? That thousands or millions of otherwise normal people are just walking around claiming to be Professor X.
It's very rude, you know, to read my thoughts or Mr. Lynch's without our permission.
Let's take a look at our final Jeopardy category. Lives that matter.
Well, I got a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
With few exceptions, like your race, religion, and pronouns, you don't get to decide what I call you. I decide how to pigeonhole you on the basis of your actions.
No one runs around with Nazi tattoos in real life. You don't see it.
Arms covered with Nazi tattoos.
I'm over here at Fallen Heroes to get a swastika covered up.
Tim Pool is obviously on the left. What?
Well, he says it. He says the words out loud, so clearly you can't be making that up, right?
Stop listening to the words and start paying attention to the actions.
Or
Just
look at the thumbnails. Scroll down and look at the hundreds of thumbnails. Every single one of them is like, Trump was right, Trump was right, Trump's still right.
The photo appears to show more than 30 male high school students making a Nazi salute.
What were these kids even thinking? They had to know that the photo was going to get out. And there aren't enough jobs in the Trump administration for all of them. Come on.
Use irony because when it comes to something like Holocaust revision,
we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides.
I have seen angrier Yelp reviews, and they weren't afraid to use the word Nazi when describing how long their jalapeno poppers took.
Immediately following Trump's speech, former KKK leader David Duke thanked Trump for his, quote, honesty and courage.
He did get praise from one group, neo-Nazis. Trump comments were good. He didn't attack us. He said he loves us all. Careful, guys. He says he loves you now. But one day, he's going to leave you for younger Nazis.
And the way I define racism is probably the same way you define racism. You believe in the inferiority or superiority of a group based on race.
How do you fix the south side of Chicago?
The first thing you have to do is you have to load the place with police.
You see that little smirk? That's how you know he's lying. Because pleasure is not the emotion you want when someone's talking about a crackdown on black people. You can look it up. It's called Duper's Delight. So people still saying all lives matter at this point are racist assholes, because at this point, the continued oppression of black people in our country is patently obvious. So someone who hears the rallying cry, Black Lives Matter, and responds, well, actually all lives matter, is admitting that they don't actually care about equality or the oppression of black people. And just so we're clear, the Venn diagram of people who say all lives matter and people who expose their neighbors to the risk of permanent injury and death by not wearing a goddamn mask to prevent the spread of coronavirus is a fucking circle.
You're pro-life.
Of course.
It's important for Americans to do whatever they can to protect a human life.
Yes.
Why aren't you wearing a mask?
I mean, again, it's a personal choice, I think.
Harrison, Arkansas is the most racist town in the United States.
Have a little pride in your race, brother. What pride, worldwide.
Hey, all lives matter, not just black. You're Caucasian.
Because I'm tired of seeing
This right here is the biggest hoax there ever was.
It's just the next thing to ask.
It is.
Yeah, black lives do matter, but what about ours, man?
Apparently black people's lives matter more than us.
Apparently.
Get back on your highway to hell and get out of a godly man's face!
I care about everybody. If you're a young African American, an immigrant, you can go anywhere in this state. You just need to be conservative, not liberal.
No, I choose to yell, and you cannot stop me!
All lives matter. Do you not care about white lives? Do you not care about other lives? Yeah, but if you're sick and you say you have cancer, I'm not going to turn to you and say, well, come on, all diseases matter. Don't tell me about your cancer.
I have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. My happiness is best served by standing in your face and say you're a fool and wrong. You have no authority over me!
Why are African Americans still dying at the hands of law enforcement in this country?
And so are white people. So are white people. What a terrible question to ask. So are white people. More white people, by the way. More white people.
Why are there still people demanding we have to hear this asshole use the N-word before we call him a racist? Why are we still talking like racism is just the N-word?
He sure fucks a lot of chickens, but I've never once heard him say that Foghorn Leghorn is hot. So the jury's still out on bestiality.
I think all the people talking like racism is just the N-word are secret racists. Because agreeing that racism is just the N-word would be pretty fucking convenient for all those racists, wouldn't it? If we did that, then all you'd have to do is just not get caught saying the N-word on a hot mic in a toilet, and we would never hold you accountable for all your shitty racist behavior.
I'm tired of explaining to these people something that's so goddamn obvious.
While there are good reasons not to call black people the N-word, a lot of people are saying we shouldn't call fascists the N-word either. Nazi. The N-word for fascist is Nazi. Or more to the point, that we should never call anyone fascist. That fascists don't exist, at least not here in America, land of the free, beer and coronavirus. While I don't doubt some non-fascists are saying this, actual Nazis are definitely saying Nazis don't exist.
I don't think that there are Nazis running around. Nazis were a political party in Germany in the 1930s.
Nazis were like people we beat like 70 years ago in World War II.
Richard Spencer is not a white supremacist. He is a white nationalist.
Nazis are not a thing. Islam is a thing.
In 2017, as the alt-right were becoming more and more publicly prominent, he started distancing himself from them, claiming that their major focus is on race, whereas his is on Western values. Don't get me wrong here, Western values is the states' rights of the 2010s.
There are many European countries that are much better off than
you
us.
mean like the European countries with a higher density of whites? So the only time you can come up with a system that's better than America, it's a country that's more white than America.
Meanwhile, they ask to be called identitarians and race realists. They want to stigmatize words that conjure images of white fascism and replace them with words that conjure images of clean-cut philosophy majors.
I like your profile. Pro-West, pro-gun, pro-life, pro-gay, pro-Israel, pro-Trump, anti-Nazi, anti-censorship, anti-feminist,
anti-Islam.
If you're slightly right of center, you're alt-right and you're a Nazi. And you go, no, those guys hate me.
Neo-Nazis don't love me, they kind of hate me, actually.
There's no group that attacks me more than the Nazis.
To be white is to be a striver, a crusader, an explorer, and a conqueror.
Is this whole idea of white nationalism, white supremacy, is a crock. Why are we talking about it so much? Such people don't exist. We are a multiracial club with blacks, Jews, gays, Asians, etc.
It makes sense. Ghislaine Maxwell ran a brothel and worked with Jeffrey Epstein, but didn't jump on Twitter to announce to the world she was a pedophile. The Catholic Church doesn't say, "Come to Mass, we miss your boys." Nazis are the same. They don't advertise that they're Nazis. They dog whistle and make up new terms like alt-right and Proud Boys, which is why we have to judge them by their actions. Richard Spencer looks nice, talks okay most of the time.
He gives us nothing outside of racist tweets.
But when Milo Yiannopoulos said pedophilia was okay, and the alt-right guys decided he wasn't useful anymore, Milo leaked his tape of Spencer going apeshit after the Charlottesville riot, proving what most of us already knew, that he's a racist Nazi piece of shit.
We're coming back here like a fucking 100 times. Neo-Nazis don't love me, they kind of hate me, actually. I am so mad!
I am so fucking mad at these people. They don't do this to fucking me.
They're kind of misrepresented as well. Like,
we're gonna fucking ritualistically humiliate them. I am coming back here every fucking weekend if I have to. Like, this is never over. I win, they fucking lose.
Is this whole idea of white nationalism, white supremacy, is a crock. Why are we talking about it so much? Such people don't exist.
That's how the world fucking works. Little fucking kites. They get ruled by people like me. Little fucking octoroons. My ancestors fucking enslaved those pieces of fucking shit.
Richard Spencer is not a white supremacist.
I rule the fucking world. Those pieces of shit get ruled by people like me. They look up and see a face like mine looking down at them.
KKK, neo-Nazi. Those people don't like me,
to be honest. That's how the fucking world works. We are gonna destroy this fucking town.
Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
Richard Spencer got punched in the head for all the dumb, hateful things that he said. He ran away, that POS fled. He ran away, he didn't run back and said, I'm not so sure that violence solves anything. How do you argue with the racist and win? Fucking octoroons.
Only hardcore racists use those old-timey slurs. They're not bringing that shit back because they like steampunk cosplay. There are a few exceptions, of course, one or two proud Nazis willing to admit it.
They're part of the National Socialist Movement, the largest neo-Nazi group in the country.
Known in the press as New Jersey's Nazi dad, the same one who had his kids taken by protective services for naming them, things like Adolf Hitler, also known for going to court in a Nazi uniform.
Hitler. I'm a racist, I certainly am. We're a white nation, founded by and for the white man.
I'm not a Nazi.
How are you not a Nazi?
How am I a Nazi? I have seen one image of someone with a swastika flag, and no one has any idea who this person was. Quite literally anyone in the world could have attended Charlottesville.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
This weekend, they'll join the Ku Klux Klan, rallying in support of the Confederate flag.
We are determined to take our country back. We're going to fulfill the promises of Donald Trump. That's what we believed in. That's why we voted for Donald Trump.
Only we don't know who that person was because it was an unidentified White House spokesperson. Look, of course we don't support the Nazis or the KKK. You're not going to use my name, are you? I could get in trouble.
But although fascists are almost certainly racists, not all racists are fascists, and we've got a long history of comparing anyone with power or a platform to Hitler. Whether that's the Donald George Bush, the Donald Hillary Clinton, the Donald people who get uptight about grammar, the Donald or literally Obama. Here's people doing it because they didn't want the governor of Michigan to keep them safe from the plague of coronavirus.
Heil Hitler! Heil Hitler! The winner! The winner! The winner! You're a tyrannous tyrant!
I think it's unconstitutional to even mandate anybody wearing a mask. That'd be like me asking you to put a yellow star on if you were Jewish.
Nothing. I did nothing but not wear a mask. And look at all these Nazis in Nazi America.
The moment I point out that immunocompromised and elderly people have the right to live and refusing to wear a mask around them is putting their lives in grave danger, I'm told that I'm opening the door to an authoritarian takeover of the country.
I'm not a Nazi. Then why are you wearing the fucking mask? Because I'm trying to tell you.
You're sick. Turn off the Fox News and wake up.
And the number of prominent people comparing you to Adolf Hitler is actually growing by the day. I can't remember that kind of comparison being used against any other presidential candidate. Does it suggest to you that you should tone down your rhetoric and your tactics?
We want to make America great again. We have to be strong and we have to be vigilant. We don't want to lose our jobs to China. We're losing so much in this country and I have to be strong.
Some people say, hey, you know who are the real fascists? Antifa. Anti-fascists. People who explicitly oppose fascism. They're the real fascists. And guess who that idea might benefit? After all this time, fascists' best defense still seems to be, I'm rubber and you're glue.
Some people saw that as emboldening
white nationalists. Now people are also I don't saying know why you'd that say the that. president. That's such a racist There are question. some people that say that now.
Isn't it time to stop with the racism and the white privilege stuff, attacking people on the basis of their skin color? Can we just call it truce and just not talk like that anymore?
Since the average Nazi is a Southern Poverty Law Center ADL operative.
Even Fox News has covered it.
Make them feel like they look ridiculous, make them feel outnumbered, and therefore their whole yay, yay, America, Trump thing is going to go by the wayside.
How are people scared by this? Oh no, they're gonna make us look ridiculous.
Conservatives have a stronger physiological response to startling noises and graphic images.
Look at the camera filter they've added. They were like, this footage doesn't look scary enough. Let's add like the UI from Outlast.
And they focus more on negative images than positive images.
That were screaming, calling him a Nazi and saying he's a fascist, when they in fact were behaving in very authoritarian fascist ways.
That's not what fascism or authoritarianism mean. Authoritarianism doesn't mean trying to shut down people who are speaking. Authoritarianism is saying that someone who has power is morally correct because they have power. It's a form of circular logic that I've talked about in this other video here.
That's Antifa, by the way. But you're right, they're terrorists and they use terror, they use violence to achieve political gains, which is terrorism. I started this gang called the Proud Boys. No women allowed. And we have different degrees like the Knights of Columbus. First degree, you declare yourself a Proud Boy. Second degree,
I'm joining Proud Boys.
And you have to give up masturbating. Fourth degree, you get arrested or in a serious violent fight for the cause.
Really?
Yes. My guys, just 14 of them just walked into a mob of 200 people.
Just to get their stripes?
And said, I thought you guys were tough. No, they were doing it just for fun. I could tell these kids had never been in a fight, and I was just mowing through them. They use violence to achieve political gains, which is terrorism.
Don't be that f***ing guy with the goddamn spiked brass knuckles getting photos taken of you. Police are gonna be like, perfect, we can prosecute these f***ers. Look how violent they are.
There are people out there openly who are like, we're gonna exercise our Second Amendment rights by bringing these firearms to the state capitol, and if anyone fucks with us, I just want them to know we are not afraid to bite back. And this guy's like, don't show your brass knuckles because we don't want to get hit by the police, and you guys are pissing yourselves over it? Holy shit.
I am so justified in telling those fools I was going to burn down their bookstore. It's not illegal, is it?
I think burning down a bookstore is probably illegal.
Is it?
Here comes Antifa Freddy. He's always ready to fight fascism with fascism.
Starbucks windows don't stand a chance.
Let's take a look at this extremely scary shit on screen. Keep an eye on their buddy's emotional state, try to calm them down, comfort them when necessary. Everyone has a friend to look out for them. What fucking fascists?
They did more than any other race to civilize the world by affording all other groups equal dignity and respect. You would think that this would have resulted in some recognition of the sacrifice that white people have made, but instead it's led to a growing white genocide.
I feel like there is some type of outside funding.
Where is Antifa mustering the resources necessary for them to get so many black tight jeans? Skinny jeans are at least $35 at Ross. There's no fucking way they're getting this money together without foreign influence.
These are the people that will call anyone a Nazi. Yes, anyone. I mean, there's jokes about it. Chris Reagan made that song.
I'll be calling you all Nazis. So what if I become all the things I claim to not be? Bunch of Nazis.
When the neo-Nazi stuff happens, when these people shoot the mosque or the churches, yeah, we all condemn it. But how often has Antifa been in the news lately? A lot.
Antifa attacks again, swords and vandalism at New York GOP office. But in fact, the person in the video is Gavin McInnes. See, Gavin was there to reenact and celebrate the assassination of a Japanese politician by a far-right terrorist in the 1960s, an act he called an inspiring moment.
Are they as bad as neo-Nazis? No, for sure. But there's not that many neo-Nazis, and the neo-Nazis aren't showing up to lawful events and attacking people. It's the other way around. When the neo-Nazi stuff happens, when these people shoot the mosque or the churches, yeah, we all
We're behaving in very authoritarian, fascist ways.
Generally speaking, the people standing a murderous ideology are probably the ones who've actually murdered people. Not the ones being slandered for the horrible violence of throwing Milkshakes!
They don't want to hurt us. They don't want to silence us. They want us dead.
Had some milkshakes spilt over them. I'm
No,
not
no,
quite
no,
sure.
hang on. It's not someone spilling a milkshake. It's someone actively throwing a milkshake.
It was in a Fox News headline in Portland. The police said that there's quick dry or quick set concrete being mixed into these milkshakes.
There's no actual evidence.
Republicans, though, were significantly more likely to label the anti-police protesters as more violent.
There is some subtlety and nuance involved, and you have tried to
There's
strip
no
it all and
subtlety and
strip
nuance.
it all
It's
away.
either-
I used to think who would possibly categorize that Black Lives Matter chant as extreme, and the answer is Republicans.
You remember pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. That was the first time I ever heard of Black Lives Matter.
Some way to make it seem as if this not very threatening thing that you shouldn't do is actually an act of terror.
It's done to embarrass someone. It's done to make them look stupid.
Right, but only 4 years ago, we had a female politician shot dead in the street.
And in the last decade, there's been a laundry list of mass murders in the name of white supremacy, and not one singular murder in the name of Antifa. Not that Nazis can't have surprising backgrounds. Some of Hitler's SS were even Jews. But those are the exceptions, not the rule.
So this black guy's a white supremacist? Yes, he is. Well, that's handy. He can just sit at home and punch himself in the face all day.
You hear about slavery for 400 years? For 400 years, that sounds like a choice.
They try the same bullshit claim that socialists are the real Nazis because Hitler's party was called the National Socialist German Workers' Party.
Now, aside from socialist actually being the Nazi Party's name, am I saying the working class wants to haul millionaires, small business owners into gas chambers? No. What I'm saying is that's what democratic socialism is. Bernie Sanders is the most fascist of all the candidates.
You know, Thanos basically was Bernie, and that's why socialists kill so many people.
Trump's campaign team has been hard at work. They have turned Trump into Thanos.
I am inevitable.
Business for members of.
But not only did Hitler admit calls for socialism were bullshit propaganda, he slaughtered the socialists first, members of his own party in the Night of the Long Knives. But when they're not telling us that all Nazis must be socialists because Hitler, like George Washington, could not tell a lie, they're telling us that we're not ever allowed to say Nazi.
I mean, I don't lie. In fact, if anything, I'm so truthful that it gets me in trouble.
What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
If you live in our society, you've probably heard of Godwin's Law. It says, as an online discussion grows longer, the probability of a Nazi comparison approaches 1. People pushing the idea of Nazi as an unspeakable N-word misinterpret it to mean, if you mention Hitler, you lose. Meanwhile, Godwin himself, the lawyer who coined it, says it's fair to call our immigrant detention centers concentration camps and to call Jair Bolsonaro a Nazi. But while Godwin doesn't believe so, a ton of people keep telling us we should never say the N-word. You can't call PewDiePie a Nazi, it's just jokes, bro! Like that one time a Nazi name-dropped him during a mass murder in a New Zealand mosque because he's always promoted Nazis like Stefan Molyneux and others who were recently banned from YouTube. So he promised to give 50 grand to the Anti-Defamation League to prove that he wasn't a Nazi, then caved to pressure from Nazis in his audience telling him the ADL sucked, wore a Nazi-adjacent symbol in a video apologizing for his plan to do good, and promised to donate to some other charity but just never did? See? Just practical jokes, like dangling money over the graves of Nazi mass murder victims. Cool jokes, bro. Sometimes these chuckle fucks say you shouldn't call people fascist because it just hurts to have someone label you something so horrible. And I'm sorry, were you not aware you're also a toilet goblin? God forbid we call someone the N-word. The other N-word. I'm trying to make a point about the word Nazi. And as often as not, I think the people who don't want you to say Nazi are also arguing to bring back the N-word. The other N-word. But we don't hear that hurt feelings argument very often, actually. Mostly their argument is summed up by the boy who cried wolf.
You call everybody a fascist, and then when the real fascists come, nobody is going to be listening or paying attention. You know, it's the boy who cried wolf.
The left can't ever seem to pick their battles, and when everybody's a Nazi...
It doesn't matter. When somebody uses the word Nazi in America, and they say Hitler and all this other stuff, red flag goes up for me.
I'm really sick of people saying, oh,
Donald Trump is a fascist. We are currently in proto-fascism.
So they've accused their opposition of being Nazis for so long. Ben Shapiro, me, Milo, Ted Cruz.
Here's a trick the left plays to justify their violence. First, they say it's okay to punch Nazis. Then they say that every conservative, in fact, everybody they disagree with, is a Nazi.
Now they've gone in, they called everything Nazism, everything white supremacy. The word means nothing anymore.
And there were many people that got very offended on Twitter. Oh wow, what clever marketing trip, tapping into hysterical leftist power fantasy. So current, so subtly political. Wow, go fuck yourselves. Wolfenstein has always been about killing Nazis. That's what the game has always been about. So you're like 3 decades too late.
But where the left is truly culpable here is of creating a culture of painting all political opposition as Nazis, to the point where no one believes them. They are truly the little boy who cried Nazi. I cried out Nazi, Nazi, why did you not come? The villagers responded, but Timmy, you called Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin Nazis. So you see, Timmy, you can go f yourself.
The thinking goes that because we keep calling people like Obama Nazis, no one will believe us when there are real Nazis. And wouldn't that be nice if people didn't believe pathological liars? But, yeah, Trump is a person who exists, and somehow huge masses of people still believe anything he says. And don't get me started on fucking QAnon.
When I make a statement, I like to be correct. I want the facts.
Like when he told us how his inauguration crowd was the biggest in history. Or that time he told us Meryl Streep was a bad actress.
Like the fact that Ted Cruz's father killed JFK and Obama was born in Kenya. He's a stickler for the facts.
All you need is to say something with enough confidence while performing a little sleight of hand, and a lot of people are unfortunately going to believe you.
They actually watch Fox News and they believe it.
We're draining the swamp.
Everyone he surrounded himself with has either been charged or arrested. Rick Gates was convicted, Paul Manafort was convicted, George Papadopoulos was convicted,
What are you doing in my swamp? In 2019, Trump averaged an incredible 22 false claims per day.
Donald Trump won the 2016 election. You remember that because he's currently the president. But he complained that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally.
Of course, he lies just to stay in practice, it seems.
Even the color of his face is a lie.
Universal health care. I am going to take care of everybody. Who pays for it? The government's going to pay for it.
Save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without cuts. Have to do it. It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear. You know it is going away.
It's very mild. You know, we have thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that get better just by, you know, sitting around and even going to work. Some of them go to work, but they get better. Well, I think the 3.4% is really a false number. Now, this is just my hunch. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is more deadly. This is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. This is deadly stuff.
Over 7,000 more lies than there are visible stars in the night sky.
Who I know for a fact are liars. Liars. I don't believe any one of them. Not one. I believe Donald.
But when people invoke the boy who cried wolf, they only remember the lying. What they forget about that story is there was a fucking wolf who came back and put all the sheep in concentration camps. Often you'll hear people say of a murderer or a pedophile, they're not human. No, they're very human, and that's a large part of why I made this video. Dehumanizing people, declaring them not human or less than human, is a Nazi propaganda tool that they leverage against blacks, Jews, anyone they don't like. And there's a real danger in using their toolbox to distance ourselves that way.
It's not just that many are genuinely stupid. Indeed, one wonders if these people are people at all. Or instead soulless golem, animated by some dark power to repeat whatever talking point John Oliver stated the night before.
Maybe not criminals themselves, but a link to crime. All of them, as a result, get their deaths played down by right-wing media figures, because after all, they were criminals, and we don't like crime.
Jacob Blake was accused of being a rapist. I thought we're supposed to believe all women.
George Floyd at the time of his arrest was high. He has a rap sheet that is long, that is dangerous. He was an example of a violent criminal his entire life.
Ahmaud Arbery, in a school basketball game with a gun, he'd violated his probation by stealing, and nothing happened to him.
The people who were violent disruptors get put in prison. Am I the only one who finds this remarkably logical?
If the law is going to focus on punishment rather than rehabilitation, then so will society. It's a criminal, not a human. It's like how war propaganda works in getting people to go kill. If you can paint the enemy as the other, if you can strip away their humanity, they become a whole lot easier for regular people to shoot. You didn't kill a civilian. No. You neutralized a radical Islamist insurgent.
This idea that there aren't any fascists in America depends on a belief that what happened during the Holocaust was some strange aberration. That there was something deeply and uniquely wrong with German people. Like they had made some once in human history pact with the devil and that could never happen again.
Damn, I really want more Nazis, but I blew it on that exclusivity deal with Hitler. What the hell was I thinking?
Learning about the scale of their crimes led many people at the time to conclude that these people must have lost their minds and that there wasn't much of humanity left in them. The court psychologist at Nuremberg was a guy named Douglas Kelly, and he conducted pretty detailed psychological tests with these main perpetrators. The world was expecting them to find a common personality structure of the very worst kind, and the material simply didn't offer that. You can ask yourself if you wanted to be the guy to be handed the material for someone like Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, head of the 4-year plan, and then respond with, well, to me this guy looks pretty normal actually. Only Kelly himself had the guts to write in his closing statement, "From our findings we must not only conclude that such persons are neither sick nor unusual, but also that we could find them today in every other country on Earth." In 1980, two guys named George Krenn and Leon Rappaport took a look at the psychology of members of the SS, the grunts of the Nazi regime, so to say, and concluded that the vast majority of the leadership and their subordinates would have passed the psychological tests of the US Army or Kansas City Police with ease.
These posters inform us a great deal about Nazi thinking and the ways in which they presented images to the public, whether it's of this kind of strong, heroic figure breaking the chains of slavery, this playing upon dissatisfaction with the status quo.
A different clinical psychologist by the name of Molly Harrower dug up the material Kelly had gathered at Nuremberg and decided to give it another try. She mixed the material of Göring and the others with a couple of unremarkable profiles and sent them to a bunch of experts, but this time they didn't know who the people they should analyze were. She also asked them to take a guess of what these people did in their day-to-day lives. And at least this time the majority responded, but no one even came close to guessing what kind of material they had been given, with the speculations ranging from civil rights advocates to the material being taken from psychologists themselves.
The ways in which they engaged in what today we would call niche marketing. So it's women who work in the home, farmers, workers. You don't tend to associate the Nazis with the word freedom, but they used it endlessly.
Even the Germans during World War II believed that Nazis didn't exist. They had a saying, "There are no real Nazis, just good Germans." And that's the real problem. Nazis aren't strange or rare, they're incredibly, disturbingly common. So when we convince ourselves there are no Nazis, we're just creating a false sense of security for Nazis to exploit.
From this moment, no matter what we do, Titanic will founder. But this ship can't. She's made of iron, sir. I assure you, she can. And she will. It is a mathematical certainty.
How much time?
After World War II ended, German officers held on to that idea that there weren't any real Nazis. During the Nuremberg trials following the war, it was so common for the tried officers to use "just following orders" as a defense, it became known as the Nuremberg defense. The subsequent Milgram experiment, inspired by the Nuremberg defense, showed us that most people can justify inflicting suffering on others that way. It fits right in with what Martin Luther King called white moderates, and Mark Twain called the lie of silent assertion, and the immortal misquote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing." So many people are comfortable with injustice as long as it's orderly injustice. Like how some people are more upset about the rioting after George Floyd's murder than they are about the fact that cops kill about 1,000 Americans a year. And black men are twice as likely to be killed. The most ironic tragedy might be caused by us being too nice. Ah! Alex Jones, no! Bad Nazi! We want to think our neighbors are also nice. And most of the time we're right, but while we might say one particular neighbor is an asshole, most of us would never accept that any of our neighbors could be Nazis. That's just too horrible to imagine. It would be un-American, so it can't be true. We refuse. When it comes to our neighbors, don't say the N-word. Nazi. The N-word is Nazi.
Why did I write it this way?
You have to agree, there is a non-0% chance that PewDiePie is a crypto-fascist. It's possible. I don't want him to be. I don't want that to happen. I don't want the #1 subbed YouTuber on this fucking platform to actually be a Nazi. I don't want to be right on this.
He sat next to me in my AP English class. Fast forward to today when I see news articles about how Andrew was a leader of a neo-Nazi movement online devoted to idolizing Dylan Roof, an actual white supremacist terrorist. I've seen some posts from people that I went to high school with saying that they're a little surprised, they wouldn't expect it to be Andrew. These white supremacist groups rely on the fact that you will write it off as just a meme or ironic racism or something like that.
Not being able to understand how these events unfold is laid bare in the responses to Nazi comparisons, and what it seems to boil down to is, why are you invoking the Nazis? It's not like the US puts people into gas chambers.
These fucking elite terrorist orgs. Do you think this is how the Taliban meet? Like they all just cuddle like in their local fucking Baghdad library?
I sometimes fear that people think that fascism arrives in fancy dress, worn by grotesques and monsters, as played out in endless reruns of the Nazis. Fascism arrives as your friend. It will restore your honor, make you feel proud, protect your house, give you a job, clean up the neighborhood, remind you of how great you were.
Historians like Richard Evans, who wrote the Third Reich trilogy, which is fantastic, typically don't start their analysis with Hitler's first electoral victories, but go back as far as Bismarck. They talk about the spreading of scientific racism in the 1890s, or local anti-Semitic politicians pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable in political discourse. First you stretch what is acceptable to say, then you push what is acceptable to do. The discrimination of Jewish refugees in Weimar, laws like prohibiting Jews from owning dogs under the Nazis, these are just as much part of the genocidal process as is pulling the trigger years down the line. This is why Nazi comparisons are not only valid, but necessary.
YouTube recently removed a lot of the more obvious fascist channels from their site, like Stefan Molyneux and Eva Lion. For those unfamiliar, here's a short clip of Eva Lion.
What we hear about Hitler through the media and the school system is extremely biased because they don't want to offend the Jews. He was a very strong leader and a brilliant man. Adolf Hitler truly cared about his people and his country. The one who does the most for the community has the highest social status, instead of the one with the most money.
Okay, that's enough of that bullshit. There's only so much I can take. Thankfully, that channel was removed. However, just like Stefan Molyneux, it had a boatload of subscribers. That's a lot of people lining up to jerk off to the idea of Hitler being a great guy. And where do you think those people came from? Do you remember the white genocide clip from earlier in the video? Yeah, that guy's still on YouTube, and his subscribers are your neighbors.
A Washington Post ABC News poll found that 9% of Americans believe holding white supremacist or neo-Nazi views is acceptable. Even if we assume that this study was wildly off and 9% is a huge overestimation, if even 1% of the US population thought that holding neo-Nazi views was acceptable, that'd be more than 3 million people. Trust me, they are out there.
Not to mention Steven Crowder, who not only is never even slightly curtailed for violating YouTube's rules, but other smaller creators get censored for publishing videos critical of him. So the rule on YouTube is there are 2 times you get the ban hammer. If you have swastikas everywhere while saying Hitler was a great guy, or if you say Crowder's not.
What if I were to say that white people, on average, have higher IQ scores than black people, on average? Is that white supremacy?
Stephen calls Taylor a white nationalist, but supports Stefan Molyneux financially and shares his work, who then supports Taylor financially and shares his work. The link from Stephen Crowder to someone Stephen Crowder considers a white nationalist consists of one other white nationalist. She made a video popularizing the white supremacist Great Replacement conspiracy theory, the same conspiracy theory that inspired the Christchurch mosque shootings that killed more than 50 people in New Zealand. The shooter titled his manifesto, The Great Replacement, even. And Lauren Southern is a frequent guest on Stephen Crowder's show. Milo Yiannopoulos has appeared several times on Stephen Crowder's show.
Sounds like
What's this?
That's my Jew finger thing.
And of course, Gavin McInnes is a frequent contributor to Stephen Crowder's show.
Hitler, really what he was trying to do is clean Germany. Clean it of the parasites, of the fleas. He did not hate Jews. He hated filth, and he was trying to clean up.
If fascism were always that obvious, it wouldn't be dangerous, because sites like YouTube would kick them out every time. But who cares about YouTube, right? How about the most watched show on Fox News? Is that influential enough for you to consider this a problem?
He has the #1 show in all of cable news. This may be a lot of things, this moment we're living through, but it is definitely not about Black lives. For years, Tucker has hired a guy, first at a website called The Daily Caller, then at Fox News. Neff, it turns out, is a certifiable racist, writing the first draft of many, if not most, of Tucker's TV essays.
You know what? This local news anchor is underselling it. The Daily Stormer is probably the most well-known neo-Nazi website in the world. It's named after a 1930s German Nazi newspaper called Der Stürmer, and Andrew Anglin, who created and runs the Daily Stormer, has said in court that he denies the Holocaust happened at all. That same guy describes Tucker Carlson's show, the single most watched show on cable news, as the Daily Stormer on TV. Most of your fascist neighbors know better than to be as obvious as Eva Lyon's post-mortem hand jobs for Hitler. So we need to stop refusing to see fascist tendencies in our neighbors and treat it like maintenance on a car. If you ignore early warning signs, you pay a much higher price at the mechanic.
I hate Illinois Nazis.
So when the first issue of Captain America, the cover of it looks like this, as soon as the issue hit stands with this front cover, those same Nazi sympathisers sent poorly worded death threats to Marvel officers.
We don't actually have anybody out there that's pro-white in our media, and in fact our media
except all those white people
is completely anti-white. Well, it's got a lot of Jewish people in it.
For most of the period of the Weimar Republic, the Nazi Party was largely a joke. They learned how to simplify a message, how to play upon voters' emotions, how to reduce very complicated issues to slogans.
Daryl Johnson is the former senior terrorism analyst at the Department of Homeland Security. He says the president has consistently ignored the rising threat of right-wing extremism.
So the combined total of far-right extremists active here in America is in the hundreds of thousands. Now compare that to ISIS supporters. We have probably just a few thousand of those. I can personally say that we have hundreds of analysts in the U.S. government looking at Al-Qaeda and ISIS and their affiliates, but we have mere dozens of analysts looking at non-Islamic extremists here in America.
The challenge with having Stephen Miller in the ear of the president in the White House, the AP broke yesterday that 69,000 migrant children have been held in detention for-profit industry camps under his direction.
Steve Bannon, who said he was making Breitbart the home of the alt-right. If you dare to say, wait a minute, why is Steve Bannon just sort of an ordinary figure in the Trump administration, you were looked at as if you were insane.
They talk about white genocide. They talk about cleansing people of color from this country.
So what do we do with all these dog-whistling Nazis? How do we distinguish between actual Nazis and generic racists? They're both serious issues to be sure, but I think they call for different tactics, since your average racist uncle isn't as likely to be involved in an actual lynching or a mass murder. Fascism is, like a lot of things, somewhat difficult to define. It's cropped up not just in Germany, but in Italy and a lot of other places, and the locals generally season it differently. So we need some way to compare the similarities in the places it's taken hold. Not just out of some compulsive need to label things, but because fascists kill people. The most popular definition of fascism seems to come from Umberto Eco's Ur-Fascism, in which he describes 14 characteristics common to fascist regimes. Not every fascist or every fascist regime displays every trait, so you can think of this like a chicken fucking scale. The more chickens you fuck, the more likely you are to Rule 34 on Foghorn Leghorn. The rest of this segment was originally going to be me going over the 14 points in Ur-Fascism, but that was way too long. So I'll link to it below and a couple of videos of other people doing that. You can also check out these 2 other videos of mine where I discuss the link between the 2 most important points of fascism, authoritarianism and racism. Before I go, I want to say this video was harder than usual to make. It took me about 3 months and I was still kind of rushing at the last minute to get it out before Election Day. I expect the next few weeks to be hard on all of us here in the US, so if there's any way that I can help, please reach out to me. Lately, the easiest way to reach me is on my Twitter. There's a link below. I genuinely believe together we can make the world a better place. It's not always easy, but I think it's always worth it. Thanks for sticking with us. Part 1 of this episode was mostly about how we talk about fascism. Part 2 tomorrow will be mostly about recent events, and I hope to see you then.